Good afternoon. We are back with more Bible basics as we continue our review of the books of the Bible. We began in Genesis and we have now worked our way to the wonderful book of Numbers. Numbers doesn't get excluded maybe as much as Leviticus because it has some more stories, but it is often kind of brushed to the side and not emphasized as much. And that's really sad because there's some wonderful things in Numbers. And I think we want to look at some of that today as we dive into another review. This time I want to start with an emphasis on the title. We call the book Numbers, and this is from the Greek title arithmoi. You can see arithmetic there, the connection. And this is because of the two census lists in the book. Twice in this book, they count the people of Israel in chapters 1 and chapter 26. And both times we come over 600,000 men of fighting age. But this is just a small part of the story of Numbers. The fifth word in the Hebrew of the text is translated or can be translated in the wilderness. And this is typically the Hebrew title of this book. And I think that is maybe a little bit more descriptive, a little more apt, as the wilderness is the setting for most of the action in the book of Numbers. And so just a clarification there. I'm not saying that we should stop calling the book Numbers or anything, but that's not all it's about. That is just a small part of the book. As you begin to try and outline this book and break it down into manageable sections, you're going to find very quickly that that's really hard to do in this book. So I have borrowed an outline from Hill and Walton's survey of the Old Testament, and they break the text of Numbers down into three sections, and it's by geography. First, we are still at Sinai, but we are preparing to leave Sinai. And that's Numbers 1 through 10. And then in Numbers 10, 11 through 20, 21, we are moving from Sinai to Kadesh Barnea. And then in chapter 20, verse 22 through the end of the book, 36:13, we are moving from Kadesh Barnea to the plains of Moab right before Moses dies, Joshua takes over, and they enter into the promised land and begin the conquest. So what I want to do now is not to overload you with information, but they also provide kind of the happenings of these sections. So I want to start in the first section, preparing to leave Sinai. I'm just going to show you what all is happening in this section. This section is very legislative. There's a lot going on here of laws and rules and things they need to be doing and things they need to be focused on. And so we might come to these 10 chapters and think this is really boring. Maybe that's why we're so quick to throw Numbers to the side, because the first section is fairly tedious. But then you get to the second section as we move from Sinai to Kadesh Barnea, and some things begin to get a little bit more exciting. There are some stories, some narratives interspersed through this section. You can see you have the sections of grumbling and unrest, how God provides food for the people when Aaron and Miriam are wanting more credit than they're getting, the story of the 12 spies. But then we come back to more law. Well, then we have the story of Korah and Dathan and Abiram. Well, then we have more legislation, more ritual. And one thing I thought was very helpful in his commentary, Gordon Wenham says the laws prescribe how Israel is to travel organized as the holy army of God to the land of promise, and what they are to do when they arrive there, while the narratives describe the twists and turns in the journey. I thought that was a really good way of putting that. And so there are laws here. We can't get around that. And so the stories, the narratives, the drama is interspersed throughout that to kind of tell us the twists and turns of everything that was going on. I thought that quote was very helpful. And then we come to the third section of the book of Numbers as we move from Kadesh Barnea to the plains of Moab. And we see all this that's going on. They've basically broken it down into chapters, and all that is happening here. Start with Aaron's death, and it moves on from there. There's a lot of things going on there. And it's in these last two sections that we usually teach these stories in Bible class to the little ones. These are the stories that we often pick up on and emphasize. As we think about some major themes in the book, the first that I think of is the fulfillment of God's promise to Abraham. Remember, God had told Abraham to go outside and to look at the stars. And if he could count them, great. That's the number of descendants that he would have, or the sand by the seashore. And the nation has been growing and growing and growing from the time they went down to Egypt to the time they come out of Egypt. Remember, that's what had Pharaoh so terrified. But we see that God is fulfilling his promise to Abraham. And as they leave Sinai, they are headed to Israel for God to fulfill another promise that he had made to Abraham. And we, of course, know that they don't get there. We'll talk about that in just a moment. A second theme that you see in the book of Numbers is that God dwells in the midst of Israel. He is right there in the middle of everything. He is not some distant God that they don't know about, that they're not talking to, that they're not hearing from. He is right in their midst. Quite literally, in fact, I just threw up a very simple chart, nothing difficult, nothing fancy here, of the camping layout of the people of Israel as they were going through the wilderness. And you'll see over on the right that Judah leads the group to the east, and Reuben, the group to the south, Ephraim, the group to the west, and Dan, the group to the north. This is how they were camping. This is how it was structured. And you see right in the middle is the tabernacle. Right in the middle is the dwelling place of God. And right around the tabernacle are the priests to the east, and then the Levite divisions to the southwest and north. And so God is right in the middle of his people as they dwell around him. And remember, as we go back to Exodus, this is what God wanted. He said, I want you to be my people, and I will be your God. So God dwells in the midst of Israel. And one of the clear things you see in the book of Numbers is man's faithlessness. They cannot seem to get it together. They do not have the faith in God that they ought to have. We see the regular complaints of hunger and thirst. It cracks me up. One of the first times they're like, oh, we want to go back to Egypt. They had such wonderful cucumbers and onions. And I can't help but laugh at that, two things that I don't particularly care for. And yet that was why they wanted to go back to Egypt. How foolish that was. We see Miriam and Aaron confront Moses about the glory that he seems to be getting, and God puts a quick stop to that. The spies go into the land of Canaan, and they come back and say, we can't take it. We're not strong enough. We can't do it. We see Korah, Dathan, and Abiram claim that everyone is special. Everyone can be a priest. They're not listening to God. They're not having faith in God. Moses strikes the rock when he was told to speak to it. And God specifically says, because you did not believe in me. And then we see over in chapter 25, the Israelites at Baal Peor, as they intermingle with the Moabites, as they have sexual relations with them, participate in idolatry. It is horrible. Man is completely faithless. In Psalm 106, you have a poetic retelling of the history of Israel. And in Psalm 106, the emphasis is on man's faithlessness. Well, in the psalm right before that, it's a poetic retelling of Israel's history, but it's from the standpoint of God's faithfulness. While man is faithless, God is faithful. He always has been. This is one of the main stories of Scripture, is that while man is faithless, God is faithful. And even every time man complains about hunger, God is right there to save him. Every time man doubts, God is right there to affirm. One of the places that you see this is in the story of Balaam and Balak. Balak hires Balaam to prophesy against Israel. And every time, you remember, he goes to the edge to speak the curse against Israel. And every time he opens his mouth, blessings come out. And you see God there. God is completely faithful. Everyone else is trying to hurt Israel, yet God is being faithful to the promises that he has made to bless them and protect them. Anytime Israel is in need, God fulfills. The problem is Israel doesn't learn their lesson, and they continue in their faithlessness. A last point, last theme that we pick up in Numbers is that the wilderness is going to be a place of testing. We know what happens when the spies come back with the poor report. God says, fine, if you don't want to have faith in me, if you don't want to do what I've asked you to do, then we'll just wander out here in the wilderness for 40 years and your children can go in. And for 40 years, they wander in the wilderness. They're stuck out there while they die. And from that point on, the wilderness is going to be synonymous with testing. And then we open up to the New Testament. I'm thinking Matthew chapter 4, as Jesus has just been baptized, and it says that he is taken into the wilderness where he fasts for 40 days and 40 nights, and the devil comes to him and tempts him. Again, the wilderness is this place of testing, and that's what it's going to be for the Israelites. So there's a whole lot going on in this book. There's some really exciting things going on in this book. There's much for us to learn, so don't be intimidated how it begins with some legislation. Don't be intimidated by the sporadic groupings of laws that are in the book. There is a lot of good meat for us to learn from, and we can always learn from the legislation and the laws as well. It's not just there for history's sake, it is there for our learning. Before we end, I want to share with you a song that you know well, Guide Me, O Thou Great Jehovah. I want you to listen to the words of this song and tell me what book the story of this song comes from. Guide me, O thou great Jehovah, pilgrim through this barren land. I am weak, but thou art mighty. Hold me with thy powerful hand. Bread of heaven, feed me till I want no more. Bread of heaven, feed me till I want no more. Open now the crystal fountain, whence the healing stream doth flow. Let the fiery and cloudy pillar lead me all my journey through. Strong deliverer, be thou still my strength and shield. And the final verse. When I tread the verge of Jordan, bid my anxious fears subside. Bear me through the swelling current, land me safe on Canaan's side. Songs of praises I will ever give to thee. Songs of praises I will ever give to thee. What a great song. We love that song. But if we stop to think about how this is the journey through the wilderness, now obviously this is going to be kind of reapplied to our lives, but this comes straight out of the book of Numbers and helps us better appreciate, I think, this song and what is going on in the book of Numbers. We'll see you later this week as we dive into the book of Deuteronomy.